Hello and welcome in to Addison the 35th podcast, your Chicago baseball authority. My name is Herb Lawrence. I can be found at Twitter at Ecknerwall23. My last name Lawrence, spelled backwards, ECNERWAL23 is for Robin Ventura. You want to go to Blue Sky? I'm there at herblawrence.bsky.social, or I'm just Herb Lawrence on Instagram. On today's show, we have a question from our guest. We call the segment Batted Around. Then we're also going to be talking about the Arizona Fall League and who got invited from the White Sox. And we will be also talking about the players on the current White Sox team under 25 that are getting me excited and hopefully our next guest excited. But first, I want to thank the folks at Just Baseball Media, Aram Layton, Peter, Appel, Jack, and all the gentlemen and women there that have helped make this Addison the 35th podcast what it is, including this gentleman right here. He is the head of operations for Just Baseball Media, the co-host of the Call Up Pod on the Just Baseball Media Network, and also a co-host on the Future Sox podcast, which is also part of the Just Baseball Media Network. It is our friend. It is our guy. His name is Elijah Evans. You can follow him on Twitter at Elijah EV, the number 8 on Twitter. Elijah, thank you for joining me once again. It's great to see you.
Good to see you too, Herb. It's always a pleasure joining you and talking some White Sox prospects here and there.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I've been watching this season, and as most White Sox fans have been having that same feeling. It's more enjoyable than it was last year, but still, this is a overall bad team. I think 33 games below 500. But there are some things that I like watching about this team that I didn't like about last year's team, the youth influx that they've had, especially the 5 players that I identify as the players under 25, even though I do not include Miguel Vargas. You can if you want to, or other players like Lenin Sosa if you want to. He's a little older than 25 or is 25 right now. But the players I'm talking about, Edgar Carroll, Kyle Teal, Chase Mydroff, Brooks Baldwin, and Colson Montgomery. If I were to rank these guys of the guys that I think are going to hit their potential and more, I probably would put Edgar Carroll and Chase Mydroff at the top of that list and Colson Montgomery and Baldwin at the bottom of that list. But I think all 5 of these guys will have a solid major league career. What about these 5 guys, and what are 2 words about these 5 guys that gets you excited about the White Sox future? And do you see a future with these 5 guys being part of the White Sox winning a championship?
Yeah, I mean, I think these guys are all hopefully going to be pieces. The ideal situation, obviously, with all of them debuting this year is that or Baldwin debuted last year, but I think you want all those guys to at least play a role. I still am not in a position where I see any of them being, the key hitter necessarily on a championship contending team, right? I think that's one thing that's going to be interesting to see as they develop, just like who emerges from a solid player on a team to a leader and a star of a team. Obviously, the couple weeks span, Colson Montgomery has had this awesome run with his 8 home runs since the All-Star break, looking like he could be a legit star, OPSing over 800 since the break. That's really encouraging to see. Do I think he's going to have some serious ups and downs with the profile? For sure. I do see that from him. And then on the other end, right, you've got a Caro and a Teal who, it's still a catching platoon, which still bothers me. We got to see them both play yesterday, which is nice, but it's rare. It's happening a little bit more lately, but we are, seeing them mostly platoon. Those guys have been, generally speaking, pretty good. Obviously, they're playing against their stronger side of the platoon, so they both have been pretty good, especially the past month or so. I think both of them actually have, looking at the last month, both of them are rocking exactly a 751 OPS, so they're kind of in that same range of what they're doing. If your catching platoon is posting a 750 to 800 OPS range, like that's a pretty good position to be in. But I do think both those guys still have kind of more room to grow. I think they're going to see some more power come along for both of them. Honestly, they both have the power to put up 15 to 20 homer seasons. It's just still getting there and getting acclimated to big league pitching. On the other end, I can't say I'm with you on the Chase Maedroth necessarily. I do think Maedroth ceiling wise is probably the lowest of all these guys. I just think that Maedroth is looked really good at times. He's looked really rough at times. He's had a really, he's picked it up lately before the injury, but he definitely had a kind of a downturn a little bit in June into July after starting the season really hot when he got called up. And I think with him, it's like the context still is going to be there. I'm not sure how much the impact will get there. I think that you'd like to see him. I think he's walking a lot less than I expected him to, at least lately. I expected him to be a guy that walked all the time, and he's still, the 330 OPP is still solid, but I think, for 33 walks across 84 games in his career now, I expected that to be a much higher walk rate considering where he was at in the minors. Strikeout rate is still really low. That's a good thing you're going to get with Maedroth. He's not going to strike out a ton. You're going to get some, quality contact from him. And then Baldwin, sneaky has been pretty impressive lately. I think people have kind of, thrown Brooks Baldwin a little bit aside, given that he's been bouncing between. I mean, the guy's been kind of thrown into every which position throughout the last season. Now he's playing third base with Vargas out and with Colson playing more short because Maedroth is out now. So with Maedroth and Vargas out now, you've got Brooks Baldwin playing third, which is a position that, he put a little bit of in the minors, but really was not his area. He's been mostly middle infield, now some of the corner outfields, right? Playing center field now when Robert was out, when Robert was sitting, like he's been thrown all over and honestly has looked really good at the plate lately. He's adding some more impact. He's hit a few nice home runs lately. I do think Baldwin can be that kind of super utility type player. And I think that's what best suits him, honestly.
And to speak to what you were talking about initially with the catching situation, the platoon that they're doing right now, and I think you echo a lot of sentiments of White Sox fans about being frustrated that both of them are not in the lineup more often than they have been. Lately, they have been a little bit more than they were earlier in their major league career, but what ultimately, I know that it's not your decision or anybody else that's listening to this decision, but if you did have the choice of, okay, one of these guys got to get the lion's share of catching duties, and the other one can still catch, but more likely he's the backup catcher slash first baseman slash designated hitter. Which one would you put in either situation if you would do that at all?
It's a tough situation, man. I really don't have a strong lean. I think both have their pros and cons of the way they've been catching. I think, generally speaking, Caro's arm and pop time behind the plate is pretty elite. I think Teal's shown a little bit more consistency on the blocking side of things. I think the framing is both of them are still kind of getting there. They're both young catchers, right? So I don't know, honestly. I'm really not sure. I think that there is a more of a path to Teal playing another position than there is Caro. So in that regard, probably I would maybe prioritize Caro slightly behind the plate, just because he's a bit younger. I still think he has a little bit more potential upside growth. I don't know. It's a really good question. I think that they're still they still both need to be catching consistently, and then they are, which is good. But I also do see the value in kind of where both of them are at and just how you can kind of figure out what it looks like for each guy and continue to kind of play them off each other. I want each of them catching 3 days a week. Honestly, that's not answering your question directly, but that's how I see it.
Hey, that's why we have you on here. I mean, I might have a decision and a way of thinking about baseball, and might have one of them, do a different position. And like you were talking about, Teal's more versatile. But I like your opinion there. That's why we have you on, because you're the head of baseball operations. You know more than most people who are listening here. So that's why we have you on here. And speaking of a person that mostly focuses on the major league squad here, I'm kind of shocked by the emergence that we've gotten out of Tanner McDougal, not because I didn't think he could do it personally, but because I've heard very little about him. And when I did hear about him earlier in his career, I know he's a high school kid out of, I believe, Vegas, that it wasn't working as early in his career, but now in 2025, he's putting it all together. What has made Tanner McDougal, 96 innings, 130 plus strikeouts, sub 2 ERA, and some of the leagues that he's been on, and going up to Birmingham and still continuing to do the things he did at high A? Why is Tanner McDougal becoming this guy, and how is he becoming this guy? And could White Sox fans on the South Side possibly see this guy make a debut maybe in late August, early September?
Yeah, I think there's a very good chance he's going to debut this year. A guy who needs to be added to the 40 man this offseason. So he would be getting added to the 40 man to avoid the Rule 5 this offseason, regardless. Given that he's already almost at his innings limit, I do expect that he's going to get some bullpen outings. I don't think you're going to see a bunch of starts from him. You know, he's already kind of tapered down to like 3 inning starts in Double-A. So I think there's a very good shot he debuts out of the bullpen this season, and that he ends up being the guy who you know can give you some fun innings back there with Grant Taylor and kind of in that similar. They did it with a couple other pitchers in the past couple of years where, you know, you get a taste of the bullpen at the end of one season, then you come up as a starter the next year. I think he has a very good shot to crack the 2026 rotation, and that might seem bullish on a guy who, you know, had a 6 ERA last season in high A. But, you know, this is a guy who was coming off of Tommy John coming into 2023, right? 23, his first full professional season. He showed a lot of promise at the single A level, but definitely still had some, you know, some areas where, like, you saw the command needed to get better. He still wasn't really locating anything outside of the fastball and the curveball. He gets slowly works his way up, gets almost 70 innings that season. Next year comes in 24 and really struggled at the high level. He was pushed, you know, it was kind of like, hey, let's get you ramped up here. And the stuff was still very good. The command was just never there. And then he just wasn't able to mix and match in the places he needed to and was getting hit hard when he couldn't locate. And then it was kind of like a reset last year. He goes down to single A. He finishes the year really strong. Comes into this season. All we were hearing was Tanner McDougal's looking good. I had multiple people in spring training say, look out for Tanner McDougal this season. And I was like, okay, I mean, this is a guy who was a highly touted high school prospect, right? And you got to remember that it takes some time to come off a TJ. It takes time to kind of find your rhythm at that level. Still a guy who's only 22 years old until already into next season, right? He's in an April birthday. So he's going to come into spring training at 22 still. And then this year, it has just really all come together, man. There's not a ton you can say other than that. Is that, you know, he's found more command, he's found control of the slider more than he ever had. So you're mixing one of the better curveballs you're going to find in the minor leagues with the fastballs ticked up 2-3 miles an hour from, you know, a middling. It was already a 96, 97 fastball, but now he's sitting 98, 99 with that fastball. So when you've got a high ride fastball that's pushing 100. Balanced off of a 20-mile-an-hour drop to his curveball, which has always been kind of his best secondary pitch, and then you mix in this slider that has kind of grown a lot this year and developed into a real third weapon for him. You got a guy who's really just destroying Double-A at this point, honestly, and the strikeout rate, funny enough, has come kind of it almost slightly down actually from last year, I think, or kind of equal level. But the walk rate's way down. You know, in Double-A, he's only walking 2.5 guys per 9 as opposed to, you know, almost 6 guys per 9 last year in High A, right? So huge difference in command. The stuff is ticked up. It sounded like he got some really good work in the offseason when I talked to him about a month ago. And this is a guy who just has just all come together for a guy who's super talented and has all the stuff. And now it's just come together. And I think you're going to see him make a couple bullpen appearances here. And then he's going to have a real shot there in a rotation spot going to next year. I mean, we've talked about this. Like, I think there's really only 2, maybe 3 rotation spots you can look at and say, oh, those guys have a spot in the rotation next year. And Tanner McDougal, like, he's going to have a real shot to claim a spot going into spring training.
I'm always fascinated why the White Sox historically, or just since I've been watching, really haven't in the last 20 years developed a sustainable position player on their roster. Tim Anderson for a short period of time, but that fell off. But more than likely than not, they could develop pitching more better than they have than with position players. I know Brian Bannister just came along a couple years ago, but so they've been having success before him, and it looks like they've ramped up that success since he started. What about the White Sox pitching lab makes them so adept at getting wins and getting dubs on that side of the ball?
Yeah, there's been a lot of good talent evaluation, honestly, the past couple of years. And I think there's been a lot of guys that are, you know, tweaking with arsenals, playing around with guys' stuff. There's been a lot of emphasis on the cutter and sinker within the organization this past year. I think a lot of guys are kind of implementing these multifaceted fastballs into their mix and just trying to kind of keep guys off balance. I think the White Sox, play into a little bit of the modern style of pitching, which is good. And they kind of have this angle of like, no matter what your stuff is, it's always useful to kind of add and implement and tweak the arsenal. And I think that's something that they've really done throughout the organization with everybody in the minor league levels and even at the major league level, right? You see guys that are mixing in stuff they haven't necessarily, thrown a lot of in the past. And then they, Davis Martin unlocked the kick change and all these different things. There's all these different guys you can look at and say, hey, that pitcher really changed their future with a pitch. And then Shane Smith, his kick change was a huge piece of what has made him kind of the breakout guy this year in that rotation, right? So I think it's just always willing to adapt adapt. I think the organization has done a good job of consistently adapting and adjusting their hitters and seeing where it leads to. And honestly, I think that's the way to do it when you're an organization who's obviously still struggling, still finding their way, rebuilding, right, and trying to continue to just change and adapt along the way. And McDougal's one example of many others who are guys that have really taken a big step forward this season. And there's some that have taken a step back, right? So that's pitching for you. But I definitely think that there's a targeted effort to make developments and strides with certain guys.
And from afar, it looks like, and I'm talking about another pitcher in their minor league system, it seems like Hagen Smith from afar isn't progressing the way most White Sox fans thought he would. But then you look at the numbers, you're like, his numbers are, similar to what they were last year's as far as innings pitched. I mean, he's been hurt a little bit more this year than he was last year. I think he went out in May. But what would you say Hagen Smith's year, his sophomore year, has been as far as progression, or has he regressed a little bit in this second year of his career?
Yeah, no, I mean, complete honesty, it's definitely been some regression. Hagen Smith is a guy that, was touted at the draft time. I mean, last year's draft, like myself and many others, like the angle was, oh, you need to take a high upside hitter. This organization hasn't. It has a lot of pitching. You already got Noah Schultz. You got a lot of these other guys, and you logically people were expecting the hitting side of things, right? I mean, Connor Griffin was on the table. JJ Weatherholt was on the table. Those are two of the top 5 prospects in baseball right now, on Just Baseball's list. So it's like you're in a situation there where it's like that's a hard pill to swallow, because the White Sox organization looked at it and said, okay, this is a guy that we think we can mold and we think is our style of pitcher, and we can fast track him to the big leagues. And the expectation when they drafted Hagen Smith, in my mind, was that he would be in the opening day rotation in 2026, right? That was like, this year would be the build-up year. You'd keep him healthy, you'd ramp up his arm, he would dominate through high A, double A, whatever. And then next year you'd go into the season with him in your starting rotation alongside Noah Schultz. And that's not the case. I don't think you can look at Hagen Smith right now and say he's going to be in the rotation to start next year, because the results haven't been there and the stuff hasn't been there. He's down 3 to 4 miles an hour from where he was in college last season. And that part of that is just his first pro season and getting his feet under him, maybe. Like, I get that. But that just can't, you're not going to get by with that. And he's still striking out guys because the slider is devastating. And, he was the SEC pitcher of the year. I think he was the national pitcher of the year last year in college, right? So yeah, he should be striking out a lot of guys in double A. The walk rate's over six batters per 9. It's a nearly 20% walk rate this season at the double A level. Not going to cut it. I mean, really, simply. I know that's like that. I don't mean to be harsh with it. And like, I still think Hagen's stuff is excellent, right? It's a 36% strikeout rate. Like, he can get guys out, and he's still not getting hit hard. That's the crazy thing. He's still got a 3.6 ERA on the season while walking everyone essentially and being down in velocity. And that's how good he can be, right? So that's what it gives me that hope with Hagen still, is that, like, what he can be. There's something there that has to be figured out, though. He hasn't looked fully healthy because the stuff has been ticked down and the command has just been nowhere near where you were hoping it would be. And yeah, this is a guy who got away with throwing really gross stuff in college, so the command didn't need to always be perfect because he was getting whiffs all the time. This is he's in double A, and beyond that, it's only going to get harder to get guys out with stuff that's not in the zone. So he's just got to find the zone a little bit more. And I think hopefully the Arizona Fall League, getting him back in some innings, and then the offseason he can really ramp up and get his body back to the right place, because he was throwing 98 in spring training and he's sitting 93 right now. And that's just a situation where I'm like, that you got to give him the time you need to give him, right? You're not going to rush him to the bigs next year. But right now he's not a big league pitcher, and there's still stuff to be done there to get to the point where you can call him up next year and feel comfortable about it.
And now going back to 2024's draft, I'm kind of thinking you're saying there Weatherholt was on the board. You have Connor Griffin, you have Caglione and Braden Montgomery on the board at that time, but the White Sox go with the pitcher. Do you think it was more of an over-reliance on their pitching lab and their confidence in that they can get this guy to the major leagues quicker than they can get a position player to the major leagues? Or was it something else that kind of positioned him to be ahead of those players? Because I remember at the time, as far as I recall, I don't remember anybody really projecting the White Sox getting Hagen Smith necessarily. That might have been because he was supposed to be going earlier, or like you were saying, they were probably needing more of a position player at that point. And I was looking for Caglione at that time. But what do you think went into that decision, going with Hagen Smith instead of those younger, like Connor Griffin, shortstop in high school, was the top high school player? I thought could have been a great fit for the White Sox.
Yeah, I think that it was kind of a, hey, we're doing really well developing pitchers. This is going to be another guy we put in, and we're going to fast track him to the bigs, and we're gonna, we're gonna keep him, make sure he's getting right, and maybe they do, and I hope they do, because again, like there's still plenty of stuff to be excited about when it comes to Hagen Smith, but yeah, this year hasn't been great, and it's hard to look at, and when you see the way Weatherholt and Griffin and some other guys in that draft class are developing, who knows if that would have been the same case in any given organization, right? But at the same time, like you have to look at that and wonder, hey, like could there have been a little bit more there to be excited about, and a little bit of a more consistent player. I mean, JJ Weatherholt's going to debut in the next couple weeks here. He's after this August 16th, so they protect his rookie eligibility. He's going to debut because he's been maybe the best hitter in minor league baseball this season. Like he's been incredible, and he's in AAA already, and he's going to be, playing in the infield every day for the Cardinals for the next 6 years plus. And that's a hard pill to swallow, right? The White Sox, yeah, you've got some infielders, you've got some pieces, but like JJ Weatherholt would instantly be the best hitter on the roster probably like tomorrow. So it's a tricky situation. I think you have to look at it and be a little honest, but then again, we're only a year later from the draft, right? There's still plenty of time. A lot of things can change in 2-3 years subsequent from the draft time. So, Hagen Smith is 21 years old still. He doesn't turn 22 till next week. So this is a young guy. He's tons of arm talent. You just gotta see where it goes, and you're gonna need to see some serious strides taken here at the end of the season and going into next year.
And with this year, I thought, of course, this is 100% remaking year. It's a year that you're trying to rebuild and get some young players some playing time. And so when they got the players like Austin Slater and later Adrian Hauser, etc., Mike Tauchman still on the team, Michael A. Taylor still on the team, Josh Rojas still on the team for some reason, I thought the trade deadline was going to be a huge purge. They're going to get rid of Austin Slater, which they did. They're going to get rid of Adrian Hauser, which they did, and etc. The other 3 players that I named, but those 3 players are still on the team. So overall, for the trade deadline, I give Chris Getz like a C-D because you didn't get rid of or get enough players back from the offseason acquisitions that you got. But for the players that they actually did get back, they got Curtis Mead, Duncan Davitt, and Ben Peoples from the Tampa Bay Rays for Adrian Hauser, and then they got Gage Zeal for Austin Slater from the Yankees. And I think he's already in the Just Baseball top 18, top 20 right now. So, what do you think about the return for those 2 players they did give away, and what do you think about overall the trade deadline and what Chris Getz and his team did or didn't do there as far as the acquisitions for the trade deadline?
Yeah, in terms of like the actual returns, I think Curtis Mead is the player of note there. I think that's the guy who you're looking at who, can he establish himself among all this various crop of infielders as a guy who you are penciling in and then, being a part of your future, right? This is someone who had been a fairly highly touted prospect, and I think has shown a lot of reasons to believe he could be a solid big league piece. But, in 2 seasons, 3 seasons, including this year, last year, and the year before with Tampa, it's like a total of like 100 something games, 100 or so games across 3 seasons for a guy who, debuted at 22 years old in 2023 and just has really never gotten off the ground. And then you look at kind of Lenyn Sosa, right? Lenyn Sosa is another guy who really never got full innings his first year or two. Now he's one of the better hitters on the White Sox, honestly, the past, couple months here, right? Probably the best, honestly. So this is a guy who I just think needs at bats. And I'm not sure how they're going to shake it out right now with Vargas out and with Meidroth out now. It's a little easier. How they fit Mead into the equation when everybody's healthy, I'm not sure, honestly. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what a Coulson, Vargas, Sosa, Mead, Meidroth, even a couple others on the way, like infield looks like. Like, how do you balance that timeout? Because I do think Curtis Mead could be a solid big league piece. If he's a guy who can play some innings at third, he can play some innings at second, he can play some innings at first. He has played significant innings everywhere except shortstop within the infield. That's a versatile piece to have and a useful guy to have in your spot there. I think there's definitely some stuff for him to tap into that he hasn't really fully yet. But I also don't know exactly how he fits into the equation. Other guys, I think more of depth guys in the organization. I think Gage Zeal for Slater's for anything for Austin Slater there was great. I think getting a veteran platoon hitting outfielder and turning him into a quality arm who's young still. I mean, Gage Zeal's 2022, recently 22, has had a pretty solid season. This is his first full professional season. He was a 4th rounder last year, right? So turning a Austin Slater into a 4th rounder from last season, like I'm all for it. That's a no-brainer in my eyes. And then Peoples and Davitt, just, depth arms we'll see. I think Peoples has the octane stuff to be a solid reliever. You've seen a lot of guys in the system right now who there's a lot of sneaky, pretty good, impressive young relievers in the organization right now. And I think Peoples slots right into that thing where it's if he can find a little more command, a little more consistency, he could be a bullpen piece. And then Davitt, we'll see going into next year, could be kind of a depth arm, could eat some innings here and there in the long end of a bullpen potentially.
And the thing is, I think that these players are, like you said, for Austin Slater to get anything for him, awesome. And the fact that they got a guy that might to turn into something is awesome. Like that is the dream when you do sign Austin Slater. Mike Talkman, I hope next year you get same or better return, and I don't think they're going to get anything from Michael A. Taylor, even when they he leaves the White Sox. But it's awesome to see that they have turned something that they initially planned to turn into an actual piece, and hopefully this Curtis Mead does get a little run, because I think those are the type of players the White Sox are going to need to have like position players from other people's organizations to turn into something that might strike gold. So that'll be good for the White Sox.
On the end of just like the deadline in general, I just think the market wasn't there, unfortunately, and that's what's tough. I think from an outside perspective, it's really easy to say, oh, they didn't do enough, and I at the time was definitely feeling that way. Like, where was there should have been more action there, but also it's just like there just wasn't a lot there. I think that Luis Roberts' market was not where they thought it would be, and ultimately it was like, he's playing well right now, we're going to just bite the bullet. We have no money to spend. We have no money on the books next year. We'll just deal with the money and eat it and see if he can kind of get back to more of himself and then increase his value, because he has lately. I mean, honestly, he's looked a lot better in the past month and a half now. Since the start of July, he's been a pretty good player and a lot more of the Luis Robert that we expect to see. So I think that it was kind of just a reality of the market. There was really no market for the starting pitcher market. Was crazy. I think there was this weird kind of standoff among all teams and sellers where the price was too high for starting pitchers. Teams wanted starting pitchers, but the price was high. No, high-end starters end up getting moved, right? Like there really wasn't a huge deal for a starter. And then you look at the outfield side, I just think there probably just wasn't a ton of interest out there for a Taylor, for some of these other veterans, right? I would have been kind of interested to see what Lenyn Sosa package could have looked like, just because he has been really good, and I still don't know exactly how he fits into this team, just from a positional standpoint. We've seen Sosa just not really be able to handle a position consistently, and there's too many guys that are competing for time at second base. So interesting to consider if that would have been, what that would have looked like on the market. But ultimately, I just don't think there was a ton of interest in a lot of the guys the White Sox had on the table.
And just a thing that I didn't send to you pre-show, but you just sparked my interest right there with the answer you gave. Luis Robert, like there was interest for Luis Robert from the Mets, the Phillies, the Padres, etc., but they didn't want to pay the price. And Chris Getz, of course, has his, ideal of what he should get back for Luis Robert, probably dealing more with the 2023 Luis Robert instead of the current day 2025 Luis Robert. And the other GMs are like, that's the 2025 Luis Robert, and he's a rental because we're not sure we're going to pick up that $20 million. But say the White Sox, like most of us believe, are going to pick up that $20 million option for next year. Do you think there's a possibility there could be a revisiting of, okay, this outfielder is gone? So Kyle Schwarber is not really an outfielder. He's a DH. He's on the market. He's gone. You get Cody Bellinger off the market. He's gone. And then some other team, and I'm missing one big-time outfielder who's a free agent this year.
Tucker.
But Spark. Yeah, Kyle Tucker. If the Cubs don't do what they're supposed to do, and he's gone to some other team, do you think that another team like the Phillies, the Padres, or the Mets were like, you know what, $20 million for that player that ended the 2025 season looking like more Luis Robert might be worth the risk, and we could give up a marginal, top 100 guy, and Chris Getz could bite? Could you see that happening this offseason?
I do think the market is part of why they held. I think that when you look at the outfield crop beyond those three that you mentioned, and then Schwarber being a DH at this point, frankly, so it really is just Bellinger and Tucker, right? Like there's a really thin outfield pool. So if Robert continues to play the way he's playing right now over the next month or two, I could very much see a team taking that swing, because I think Getz logic and part of the reasoning at the deadline was like, hey, in that market that's really thin in the outfield and free agency, Luis Robert would get a 1 year prove it deal for 15, 20 million, right? So at that point, you might as well just pick up that option. And if somebody wants to pay him that prove it deal and say, hey, you got to show that you're the best version of yourself for 1 year at 20 million, that price is not that crazy given the rest of the market. So I do think that's the main reason there that we're going to see, that we see the White Sox hold, and we're going to see, what they're kind of doing there. I think there's a world for sure where somebody makes that type of move. And if not, then you revisit the deadline next year and it's the same situation sort of, and you just hope he's having a better year.
On Saturday, Jesus Cano at Jesus_Cano 88 sent out this tweet. In addition to Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith, the following players will be heading to Arizona Fall League for the White Sox. Braden Montgomery, outfielder. Sam Antonacci is an infielder. Ryan Galaney, third baseman. Connor McCullough is a right-handed pitcher. Tyler Davis, a right-handed pitcher. And Carson Jacobs, a right-handed pitcher. Those 8 players will be heading to Arizona Fall League. Any word on any of the players that I talked about? We already just talked about Hagen Smith. As far as them going to Arizona Fall League, we both have talked to Ryan Galaney. We want him to do well, but I don't know if he's a little long in the tooth to make it on the White Sox. But I'm 100% rooting for the guy because he's very personable. He's doing very well at Birmingham, which I didn't expect. He's got a lot of RBI, and he could turn into something eventually. But any of those 8 guys that you're like, okay, if he has a show out Arizona Fall League, he might be seeing some 2026 action.
Yeah, I mean, that whole top 5, man. I mean, you need to see more innings from Schultz and Hagen. Both those guys missing time this season, and both those guys having some struggles this year. Like, I think for Schultz and Hagen, it's like you get their innings under your belt, you make them face high level competition, and you just try to get those guys back to what they were, at the beginning of the season, and just get them right, honestly, and build up those innings. I mean, I think the expectation is still that both those guys will be big pieces in 2026. And then those 3 hitters, man. I think the 3 hitters are guys that you want to see in the big leagues next year. I think, and you mentioned Galaney, but I think Braden Montgomery, Sam Antonacci, and Galaney are all 3 guys I've talked about plenty this year because all 3 of them are, hopeful pieces of this team, honestly. I think Braden Montgomery, obviously, the goal is for him to be up next year. I think when they acquired him in the Crochet trade, it was like, this is the development year, and next year you're hoping he can be a big league piece. I don't think he breaks camp. I still think there's some work to be done there, but he has shown a lot of life lately in AA, and I think that the eventual goal is that Braden Montgomery will replace either, a Benintendi or a Tauchman at the deadline next season. I think that's the plan there, is that he can be, by the break, by mid-season next year, that Braden will be in Chicago taking over a corner right field spot. And then you look at Sam Antonacci. That's a guy who I've sung the praise of all season, and I've been super high on because, he's a stud. This guy just keeps producing. He has been one of the better hitters in the system all year. He gets on base. His contact skills are very, very good. The swing is consistent. It's steady. I think that he's a guy that's going to just give you big league at bats, and I think can have a chance again. Same thing, kind of mid to next year at an infield position, whether it's a platoon spot or however you want to shake it out. He's going to get some innings in the big leagues by the end of next season. And then Galaney, I'm not sure why he's listed at third base. I don't see Galaney playing anywhere other than first at the next level. But I do think that Galaney is a guy who, you look at the first base position in Chicago, and that's the one spot in the infield where I don't feel like I'm confident in someone being the first baseman of the future. I think that Vargas can play some first, some third, but I don't think he's like a solidified first baseman. I don't see Tim Elko like claiming a first base spot. Same thing with even Curtis Mead, right? Like there's nobody that's like stamping first base, I think. So I could definitely see Galaney at least as a platoon guy, someone who's continued to put up numbers and for a older college power hitter type archetype, doesn't strike out a lot, which I love. This is a guy who's able to maintain the barrel pretty well and doesn't kind of whiff as much as you'd expect from his profile. So I do think that all those guys are going to get a shot next season. The other 3 are kind of just some more arms in the system who need some innings. McCullough coming off of surgery, so he just hasn't thrown a lot. Carson Jacobs, Tyler Davis, some fun bullpen arms, but still young and still kind of on the way. I think they just want to test those guys against higher competition. But really, yeah, Hagen and Schultz are 2 huge pieces of the future in that pitching side, and those 3 hitters I think are all going to debut at some point next year.
And the last thing I got for you, Elijah, and we really appreciate you coming on with us. It's a segment we're going to call Batted Around. Multiple questions here. It's because I am a believer that if you say batted around, that means that's 9 guys came to the plate. Elijah, what is your definition of, hey, the White Sox batted around that inning? Is it team 9 or is it team 10?
I think it is Yeah, I think it's 9. I think you get through the whole lineup, and that can qualify as batting around. I think that's what I would go with.
Look at Elijah. I'm on the side of smart people, so I am right. And the segment also is called Batted Around because I'm going to ask you to ask a question of a future guest, our next guest, which is to be determined. He doesn't know. Elijah Evans doesn't know who I'm going to have on next. It could be him. He could be asking himself a question in the future. It could be Ryan Herrera, who is our Cubs part of Addison to 35th. But Elijah, what question do you want to throw out there in the ether for our next guest to answer?
Let's go with. I was thinking about this earlier. I was like, oh, this is. I always like hearing people's answers to this because I have a few in the White Sox world. Who is one prospect that you were so certain was going to be a stud and ended up not going that direction? That'll be my question.
That is perfect. That is Elijah Evans. You can follow him on Twitter at EV8, the number 8 on Twitter. Elijah's first name, EV, the first 2 letters of his last name, and 8, the numeral. He is the head of operations at Just Baseball Media, the co-host of the Call Up Pod, and also co-host of the Future Sox podcast. And all those are under the Just Baseball umbrella that just announced for Future Sox recently, and that's awesome to bring all those guys along. I'm a big-time fan of Ian Eskridge, James Fox, of course, your co-host Dylan Barnes, and Jeff Cohen down there in North Carolina, always raising up. It's always good to hear him on the podcast, and that's good that the Future Sox Prospects podcast, or the podcast that you have with Dylan and Jeff is getting a little bit more push and a little bit more play time, because I love listening to you guys pontificate about the young players, and because you guys have a lot of knowledge, and Jeff down there on the ground, boots on the ground in North Carolina, it's always interesting, Elijah.
Appreciate it, Herb. It's been cool. We're super excited. It's a lot of good things coming at Just Baseball for sure. It's been fun to really dive into all that stuff. And yeah, make sure you're checking in, everybody, on all the Just Baseball stuff. We got more podcasts on the way, more content on the way. We're gonna have some cool stuff going on for sure.
Seriously, follow Elijah EV8. He's traveling the world. He's getting information for you. He's writing good stuff at the Just Baseball website. So you can definitely get locked in. I only see 2,700 people following him. Come on, people. You guys got to get those numbers up. This man should be at the 20 to 30,000 followers limit, because he will eventually be there. So might as well get him there now. So thank you to Elijah for joining us. My name is Herb Lawrence. This has been Addison to 35th podcast. Please like, rate, subscribe. Tell a friend about our podcast. It's myself and Ryan Herrera. Ryan does the Cubs. I do the White Sox. So join us here on Addison to 35th. So until next time, see you later.